Now, when you hear Louisiana Purchase, what do you see? Perhaps a crisp, clean line drawn on a map, neatly transferring a massive, colored-in territory from France to the United States. A simple transaction. 828,000 square miles for $15 million. Done and dusted. But I tell you, the reality is a tangled thicket of ambition, fear, conspiracy, and sheer, dumb luck. It is a story where the central character isn't a general or a president, but a vast, unknown river and the whispered secrets of a continent. Imagine a town at the very edge of the American world in the year 1800. It's a bustling, chaotic, muddy place called New Orleans. But this isn't just any town. It sits at the mouth of the Mississippi River, the great spinal cord of the continent. For the American settlers pouring over the Appalachian Mountains into the Ohio River Valley, the Mississippi was their only highway. They loaded their corn, their pork, their tobacco onto flatboats and floated them downriver to New Orleans. There, the goods were transferred to ocean-going vessels and sold to the world. Who controlled New Orleans controlled the destiny of the American West. And in 1800, it was controlled by Spain. Spain was a declining empire, a comfortable, predictable neighbor. They had a habit of occasionally closing the port to American goods, which caused panic, but they would always reopen it for the sake of peace. It was an annoyance, but a manageable one. This brings us to our first piece of intrigue, a secret so powerful it could have crushed the American experiment in its infancy. It was the stuff of diplomatic nightmares, of whispered conspiracies in the candlelit salons of Europe. In October of 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte, the young, terrifyingly ambitious first consul of France, forced a secret treaty on a weak Spanish king. It was called the Treaty of San Ildefonso. In it, Spain agreed to give back the vast territory of Louisiana to France. In return, Napoleon would give his brother-in-law a little kingdom in Italy. A kingdom made out of spare parts, a trinket for the family. Think about that. Napoleon, the master of Europe, was trading the entire heart of a continent for a principality to give to his brother-in-law as a wedding present. For a year, this remained one of the best-kept secrets in international politics. While Americans went about their business, the ground beneath them was shifting. The comfortable Spanish landlord was about to be replaced by the military machine of Napoleonic France. And then, in 1802, the first tremor hit. The Spanish official in New Orleans, acting on what we now believe were secret orders from Madrid, did the unthinkable. He revoked the right of deposit. The port was closed to American goods. Suddenly, those thousands of flatboats floating down the river had nowhere to go. They piled up at the docks. Grain rotted in the holds. The economic lifeline of the West was severed. Outrage swept through the American frontier. Frontier firebrands, the war hawks of their day, screamed for action. They talked of marching on New Orleans, of raising an army to take what was rightfully theirs by necessity. And this brings us to the stage in Washington, to our main character, Thomas Jefferson. Now, Jefferson is a fascinating paradox. He was a brilliant intellectual, the author of the Declaration of Independence, a man who believed in a simple republic of yeoman farmers. He was also a staunch believer in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. The federal government, he argued, could only do what the Constitution explicitly said it could do. It did not say it could by foreign territory. But Jefferson was also the president of a nation on the brink. He saw the threat. He wrote to his ambassador in Paris, a man named Robert Livingston, and gave him a mission. Try to buy New Orleans. Just the city. And maybe, if you can, the Floridas. The goal was modest, practical, constitutional. The president was willing to pay up to $10 million. And so, Robert Livingston goes to Paris. He begins the slow, frustrating dance of French diplomacy. But Napoleon won't even see him. The French foreign minister, Talleyrand, that master of the evasive, silken insult, gives him nothing but empty promises. For months, Livingston gets nowhere. The situation feels hopeless. But remember, the secret of the transfer was not yet public. Jefferson realized he needed more. He needed a man on the ground who could think like him, a fellow Virginian, a diplomatic troubleshooter. He sent James Monroe to Paris as a special envoy. Monroe was a hero of the frontier, a man trusted by the Westerners. His arrival, it was hoped, would show France that America was serious. As Monroe is crossing the Atlantic, the world explodes. In the French colony of Saint-Domingue, the richest sugar colony on earth, a revolution led by the brilliant and ruthless former slave, Toussaint Louverture, had been raging for years. Napoleon had sent his brother-in-law, General Leclerc, with a massive army to crush the rebellion and re-establish French control. The plan was to use Saint-Domingue as the linchpin of a new French-American empire. Louisiana would be the granary, the endless source of food for the sugar islands. But Leclerc's army, the best in Europe, was not defeated by Toussaint's forces alone. They were defeated by something far more insidious. Yellow fever. The Yellow Jack. It swept through the French ranks, killing soldiers by the thousands. Leclerc himself died. The army, Napoleon's Grand Army, was annihilated, not by men, but by mosquitoes. At the same time, Napoleon's ambitions are being challenged elsewhere. The Peace of Amiens, a fragile truce with Britain, is clearly about to shatter. War with the naval superpower is imminent. And what is Louisiana, if war comes? It's a giant, undefended, vulnerable territory. Napoleon knows his navy cannot protect it from the British. It is not an asset, it is a giant, tempting target that he cannot hold. It is into this perfect storm of disaster and impending war that James Monroe arrives in Paris. The date is April 11, 1803. The very day before Monroe is scheduled to have his first official meeting, Livingston is summoned to the French Foreign Ministry. He is ushered in to see Talleyrand. And Talleyrand, the man who had given him nothing for months, the master of the vague and the non-committal, suddenly asks a question so shocking, so utterly out of the blue, that Livingston's mind must have reeled. What will you give for the whole of Louisiana? Think of the audacity. The offer was for the whole, vast, unmapped territory. Not just New Orleans. Not just the riverbank. The whole thing. Livingston stammered. He was stunned. He was not authorized for this. He tried to bargain, to stick to his original instructions. But the offer was on the table. It had to be seized. Over the next 2 weeks, Livingston and Monroe, with the help of a friendly French banker named François Barbe Marbois, hammered out the details. The price was set at 60 million francs, roughly $15 million. For that, the United States would get 828,000 square miles of land, doubling the size of the nation. It worked out to about 3 cents an acre. But the mystery, the sheer, breathtaking mystery of it all, is this: no one knew what they had just bought. The treaty described the territory in the vaguest possible terms. It was the colony of Louisiana, with the same extent that it now has in the hands of Spain, and that it had when France possessed it. But what did that mean? The boundaries were a mystery. Did it include West Florida? Did it stretch to the Rio Grande? Did it include Texas? No one knew. The maps were wrong, the geography was hearsay, and the whole interior of the continent was a blank space filled with the dreams and fears of mapmakers. Jefferson, back in Washington, received the news with a mixture of elation and profound constitutional dread. He had just doubled his country with the stroke of a pen, in a deal he had no authority to make. He, the strict constructionist, had just committed the most loose construction act imaginable. He wrestled with his conscience. He even drafted a constitutional amendment to retroactively authorize the purchase. But his advisers told him not to be a fool. The opportunity was too great, the mood of the Senate was for it, and Napoleon, they warned, could change his mind. Jefferson, the philosopher, had to become the pragmatist. He swallowed his principles and sent the treaty to the Senate, which ratified it in October of 1803. On December 20, 1803, in a simple ceremony in New Orleans, the tricolor flag of France was lowered, and the stars and stripes were raised. The transfer was complete. The Louisiana Purchase was a fact. And now, we come to the final, and perhaps greatest, mystery. The purchase of a map is not the same as owning the land. The ink on the treaty was barely dry when Jefferson set in motion the next, even more audacious chapter. He had to find out what he had bought. He commissioned a secret mission. It was to be a scientific expedition, an army reconnaissance, a diplomatic journey, all rolled into one. He chose his own private secretary, a young army captain named Meriwether Lewis. Lewis chose a friend, William Clark, to be his co-commander. Their orders were to follow the Missouri River to its source, cross the mountains, and find the best water route to the Pacific Ocean. The Corps of Discovery, as they were called, set off in the spring of 1804. They were stepping into a void. For 2 years, they vanished. No news. No letters. Nothing. They were gone, swallowed by the continent. What were they seeing? What were they experiencing? They were traversing lands that no American, no European, had ever seen. They were mapping rivers, naming peaks, encountering dozens of Native American nations, some friendly, some hostile, most utterly astonished by these strange men with their strange machines. They were not just explorers, they were the first citizens of the new Louisiana. They were living the answer to the mystery that Jefferson had purchased. They discovered that the great, imagined river of the West, that was supposed to flow from the Missouri to the Pacific did not exist. They found instead the impossible, snow-capped spine of the Rocky Mountains. They pushed on, starving, freezing, battling grizzly bears and sheer exhaustion, until they finally saw the mighty Columbia River and followed it to the crashing waves of the Pacific Ocean. When Lewis and Clark returned in 1806, they brought back not gold, not a new water route to the Orient, but something far more valuable, knowledge. They brought back maps, journals filled with descriptions of strange animals and plants, and the first glimmerings of understanding of the immense, complex, and beautiful world that lay at the heart of the continent. And so, my friends, we sit here tonight, in the warm glow of the fire, looking back at this pivotal moment. The Louisiana Purchase was not a simple transaction. It was a gamble of cosmic proportions. It was a secret revealed at the perfect moment, an offer made in desperation and accepted in audacity. It was a president breaking his own rules to build a nation. It was 2 captains and their men walking off the edge of the known world to claim a country in the name of a people who had never seen it. It is a story of how a vast, silent, and mysterious heartland was acquired, not by conquest, but by a fluke of history, a twist of fate, and the courage to say yes to an offer too good to be true. And in doing so, the young United States set itself on a path to becoming a continental power, a journey that would define its next century, for better and for worse. The mystery of that purchase is not in what was signed, but in everything that followed, the exploration, the settlement, the conflict, and the creation of an American identity from a blank space on a map. And that, I think, is a story worth telling. Friends, if you are interested in the true history of the United States without embellishment, subscribe to the Empire of Freedom channel. Click on the bell so you don't miss anything.